Commander Maya Grant stood at the window of her ship and watched the broken pieces of a dead world float past her in the darkness of Space 3. Months ago, the reports said this place was empty, but now she knew that was a lie she walked through. The metal halls of her military ship until she reached the cargo bay and stopped cold when she saw the small figure hiding near the supply crates. Child was not human, and that much was clear from the pointed ears and the silver eyes that seemed to glow in the dim light. Her clothes were torn and dirty and behind her back. Maya could see the remains of wings that looked like they had been ripped apart in the small hands of this alien. Girl was a wooden doll carved to look like a dragon. Child stepped forward on shaking legs and spoke in broken words that Maya could barely understand. Trade bread for my doll human because my sister is starving. Maya reached for her weapon by instinct, but something made her stop and look closer at this tiny being who had somehow gotten onto a secured military vessel. The scanners showed no danger and no weapons, but Maya knew something else was in the cargo bay with them. From the shadows near the ventilation shaft came a sound like metal scraping on metal, and then Maya saw the eyes. They were gold like melted metal, and they belonged to something massive that unfolded itself from the darkness. The dragon was young, but still larger than any vehicle Maya had ever seen, and its scales were black. As midnight, the child moved between Maya and the beast and held up her hands. Please, do not shoot because Ember will not hurt you, and we just need food. Maya had read the intelligence reports about the silvery people and their bonded dragons and how the Krathian Empire had wiped them all out 2 seasons ago, but here they were, standing in her cargo bay, asking for help. Maya lowered her gun and looked at the child. What is your name, Lyra? Said the girl, and her voice cracked with emotion. My sister? Neve is in the medical pod we stole, and she is hurt very badly because the Krathians did terrible things to Hertha. Girl started to cry, and Maya felt something break inside her chest. She reached into her pack and pulled out every protein bar and food ration she had and gave them all to Lyra. Keep your doll and bring your sister, because we are taking you both somewhere safe. Maya did not know that this dragon carried memories of 17,000 years of war in her mind. She did not know that Lyra was actually a princess and the last daughter of the Silveri royal family, and she certainly did not know that the Krathian Empire had just declared humanity an enemy for helping survivors. The war was coming for them all, and it would burn everything in its path. Dr. Sophie Blake stood in front of the dragon with her medical scanner and more questions than she could count. 3 weeks had passed since they brought the Silvari children on board, and Ember had grown much larger. What used to fit in the cargo bay now needed the main hangar at Luna Station because the dragon was too big for their ship. She is not just growing, but she is remembering, said Sophie to the other officers. The brain scans show that she is becoming more ancient every single day. Captain Lisa Monroe did not understand. Explain that in simple terms. Dr. Dragons do not die, said Lyra, from where she sat on the dragon's giant claw. Not really anyway, because when a dragon dies in battle, their memories go into the eggs that are hidden in special vaults. Burned hatched 3 days before the Krathians burned our world to ashes, and she carries the knowledge of every dragon who came before her, including how to fight, added Maya, with a grim look on her face. She had watched the dragon practice in the empty space beyond the station, and the things Ember could do defied all the laws of physics. Neve, the younger sister, was still in the medical bay recovering from what the Krathians had done to her. They had tortured an 8-year-old child to try to find other survivors, and what they did had turned even peaceful humans into warriors. The Krathian fleet will be here in 48 hours, said Lisa, as she pulled up the star map. They are not coming for our territory, but to kill every last Silvari and anyone who protects them. Then we fight, said Maya, with absolute certainty in her voice. We do not have enough weapons to win, but we can buy time for the civilians to escape. Ember opened her massive eyes and spoke directly into their minds with a voice like thunder. You would die for children who are not your own, and for a species you only met a few weeks ago. Yes, said Maya, simply because it is the right thing to do. The dragon lowered her head until she was looking straight into Maya's eyes. Then let me show you how the Silvari fight their wars. Human, prepare your people, because the Krathians are bringing 1,000 ships, but they have never faced a dragon who remembers the old ways, and They have never fought alongside humans who would trade everything for two starving children. The medical bay Neve opened her eyes for the first time in weeks. She smiled at the ceiling and whispered one single word that the computers recorded: burn. The Krathian armada came out of slipspace like a swarm of metal insects in their warships. Blocked out the star's admiral Zekthar stood on the bridge of his massive dreadnought called Inevitable Silence and looked at the display showing Luna Station 6. Human warships and one wounded dragon, he said. With amusement, the Silveri princess must be desperate to ask these primitive beings for protection. Begin the orbital bombardment and leave nothing alive. He did not see the trap that Maya Grant had set. Until it was far too late, the human ships were not positioned for defense at all, but were acting as bait to draw the enemy in as the Krathian fleet moved forward. The Luna Station began to separate into pieces and revealed weapons platforms hidden underneath. One instant, 300 automated missiles appeared in the middle of the enemy formation. Using experimental jump drives, their payloads were not explosives, but gravity well generators that yanked all the NCTO ships together like magnets pulling. Metal space itself screamed as the enemy vessels crashed into each other and their shields failed and their formations fell into complete chaos. And through that chaos came Ember. The dragon had grown again and was now nearly a kilometer long, with scales that shifted through colors human eyes could not properly see. But it was not her size that terrified the Krathians, but the fire she. Breath Dragon Flame did not just burn things, but consumed the very idea of matter itself and turned shields into ash and hulls into nothing. All ships. Pattern Omega commanded Maya from the bridge of the destroyer called Defiant. Use the dragon as the spear, and we are the hammer. Lyra stood beside her with small hands gripping the tactical console and silver, eyes watching as her bonded companion tore through the ships that had murdered her. People tears ran down her face, but her voice was steady when she spoke. Ember. The flagship is where Zekthar hides. The dragon roared, and the sound traveled through empty space as a psychic shockwave that shattered the minds of weaker Krathian warriors. She dove toward the inevitable silence and dodged plasma fire that could have destroyed entire continents. Her claws extended to grab the massive dreadnought like a predator catching prey, but Zekthar had not conquered 17 species by being unprepared for everything. The dreadnought's hull split open and revealed a weapon the Krathians had stolen from a race they had killed long ago. It was called a reality anchor, and it could bind even dragons to the normal laws of physics. Chains made of pure force erupted from the device and wrapped around Ember's wings and neck and limbs. Dragons burn bright, said the Admiral with satisfaction, but they still die like everything else. The anchor began pulling Ember toward the ship's matter annihilation core, where even her ancient power would be completely erased. Maya watched in horror as the dragon struggled and as Lyra screamed and as everything they had fought for started to fall apart. Then Neve's voice cut through the chaos from the medical bay, where she had been watching the battle. Lyra, do you remember what Mother taught us about the bond? No, whispered Leorai. Am too young, and I have not trained. For this we do not have time for fear, sister, so do it now. Lyra closed her eyes and reached deep inside herself to find the thread of light that connected her soul to Ember's, the bond that made Silvarian dragon into one being, and she pulled with all her strength's. Light erupted from the princess' body, and suddenly she was not on the bridge anymore. Was everywhere that Ember was, and seeing through dragon eyes and feeling dragon power and thinking with a mind that remembered when stars were young. Together they stopped struggling against the chains. Together they pulled back. Reality anchor was not designed to capture something that existed in two places at the same time. Shattered like glass and Ember with Lyra's consciousness guiding her ancient instincts, opened her jaws wide. The fire that came out was not merely flame, but the breath of creation and ending. Same power that had forged the first stars, the inevitable silence, and Admiral Zekthar with it, ceased to exist in a flash of white light. The remaining Krathian ships saw their flagship erased from reality and broke formation to flee into the darkness. Humanity had won its first battle in a war it never wanted, alongside a dragon and a child who had traded everything for a chance to save her sister. As Lyra's consciousness returned to her body, she collapsed into Maya's arms, Completely exhausted. Is it over? She whispered. Maya held her close and watched the debris field that had been 1,000 enemy ships drifting. In space, no, princess, I think this is just beginning. The Council of Human Admirals gathered on Earth 3 days after the Battle of Lunagate, and their fear filled the chamber like poison gas fleet. Admiral Patricia Winters stood at the podium with a face carved from stone and words weighted with the burden of command. The Krathian Empire controls 400 star systems and commands 3 million warships, she said, letting the numbers sink into everyone's mind. We killed 1,000 of them, but they are not retreating. They are regrouping, and they are bringing everything they have. Maya sat in the gallery next to Lyra and Neve, watching humanity's leaders struggle with the truth. The Sylvari had learned to light some wars cannot be won but only survived. The girls had been given formal asylum, along with the 17 other Sylvari refugees they had managed to find after the battle. 17 out of billions we should surrender, the children argued. General Marcus Webb returned them to Krathian custody and negotiate peace before this gets worse. Before what? Maya was on her feet before she realized she was speaking. Before they exterminate us like they did the Sylvari, and like they have done to 19 other species. Krathians do not negotiate, General, because they only conquer or kill. Then we are condemning our entire species for 2 alien children. No, said Neve's small voice cutting through the argument like a blade. 8-year-old walked to the center of the chamber, and despite her size, every eye turned to her. You are condemning yourselves with cowardice. The Krathians were always going to come for you eventually. Humanity sits on the edge of the galaxy's spiral arm, controlling jump routes to 3 major sectors. They need your space, and they were just waiting for the right moment. She pulled out a small data chip that was one of the few items she had escaped with. This contains the Krathian invasion timeline for the next 50 years. I stole it while they were hurting me. They plan to attack you next year. After the Sylvari were completely gone by sheltering us, you did not start this war, but only chose which side you would fight on. The chamber erupted in chaos, but Patricia Winters raised her hand for silence. Can your dragon win this war for us? No answered. Lyra, honestly, Ember is mighty, but she is still young and still remembering how to fight. The Krathians have weapons designed to kill dragons because they have had practice. Her voice broke with emotion. But we can teach you what the Sylvari learned. Over thousands of years, we can show you how to fight enemies stronger than you, and how to survive when survival seems impossible. And we can offer you something else, added Neve. Our world is gone, but our vaults remain hidden in slip space on side. 300 dragon eggs waiting to hatch. They can bond with humans if humans prove worthy. One dragon changed the battle at Luna, so imagine what 300 could do. Sophie Blake, who was attending as the expert on alien biology, cleared her throat. Bonding process is dangerous and requires synchronizing human and dragon consciousness. The failure rate among Sylvari was 30%. For humans with our different brain structure, it could be much higher. Than we will take volunteers, said Mayo people, who understand the risk and choose it anyway. Volunteer, came a voice from the back of the chamber. Then another voice, and then a dozen more within minutes. Half the military personnel in the room had raised their hands, ready to risk their lives for a chance to turn the tide. Patricia Winters looked at the 2 princesses, and at Maya, and at the faces of humanity's defenders. Very well, she said. We go to war, and not just for ourselves, but for every species. The Krathians would exterminate. We become the line they cannot cross. That night, Maya found Lyra on Ember's back, staring at the stars. The dragon had settled into a temporary home on the lunar surface because she was too large now to fit anywhere else. Thank you, said Lyra, quietly, for trading your bread when I had nothing to offer but a doll, for seeing us as people and not problems. Maya climbed up to sit beside her. That is what humanity does. We are not the strongest species or the smartest, but we are stubborn, and we remember who helped us when we were weak. Ember's eye opened and regarded the commander with something almost like approval. The egg vaults will open for you, Maya, Grant, but know this, because bonding with a dragon does not just give you power, it changes you forever. You will feel every death in battle and carry every memory of those we have lost. You've prepared for that burden. Maya thought of the child who had appeared in her cargo. Bay, desperate and starving, she thought of Nevi's scars and of the billions of Sylvari murdered, and of the war that was coming, whether they were ready or noti, and prepared to do whatever it takes to keep my people safe. And right now that means becoming something more than human. Then when the vaults open, said Ember, you will be first among the candidates, and we will see if humanity burns as brightly as your courage suggests. The dragon egg was smaller than Maya had expected and barely the size of her torso, with a shell that swirled with colors shifting between silver and storm cloud grayette, sat in the center of the bonding chamber aboard the newly built dragon cradle station, surrounded by medical equipment that Sophie Blake said would be completely useless if things went wrong, the egg chooses, explained Lyra, standing outside the chamber with the other candidates. You cannot force a bond, but can only open yourself and hope the dragon inside finds you worthy. 200 volunteers had made it through the initial tests, and they had been reduced to 50 finalists each. Was about to face one of the eggs that Neve had retrieved from the hidden Silvari vaults. Maya was first, not because of her rank, but because Ember had insisted. She carries the memory of our bargain. The great dragon had said the bread for the doll, and that matters to Dragon Kinmia. Stepped into the chamber, and the moment the door sealed, she felt the egg's presence in her mind. It was ancient and curious, and testing hurt. Pressed against her thoughts, seeking her fears and her hopes and her capacity for sacrifice, she did not try to hide anything because this was too important for Lysimedes. Flooded her mind of her childhood in the Detroit ruins after the third economic collapse. The hunger that had taught her the value of a single meal. First command and the soldiers she had lost to pirates in the outer reaches. The moment she had seen Lyra in the cargo bay and chosen compassion over protocol. The egg pulsed with heat and cracks appeared along its surface then. The pain hit her like her nervous system was being rewritten and her DNA restructured and her consciousness stretched. Across two bodies she screamed but held on. Titlira's voice echoed in her memory, saying, the bond requires sacrifice, and you must give up part of yourself to become part of Usta. Egg shattered into pieces, and the dragon that emerged was small and barely larger than a cat. Its scales were the color of gunmetal and starlighted. Looked at Maya with eyes that held infinite depth and spoke directly into her soul. I am Ash, and you are mine, as I am yours together. We will burn until the universe grows. Cold, the bond snapped into place, and Maya gasped as her senses exploded outward in every direction. She could feel Ash hunger and its joy and its ancient memories beginning to stir more than that. She could feel Ember far away, but present, and through her every other dragon that had ever lived. The weight of thousands of years pressed against her mind. When she came out of the chamber hours later, her eyes had changed with flecks of silver. Swimming in the brownet was the mark of the bonded Ash Road. On her shoulder, already growing and already remembering. Over the next 3 months, 43 more humans successfully bonded with Dragon 7. Died in the attempt because their minds could not handle the transformation. But those who succeeded became something new. Dragon Knights. Lyra called them, remembering the ancient silvery warriors who had fought in the first expansion. War came faster than anyone expected. The Krathian Empire sent not thousands of ships, but tens of thousands. They were determined to crush humanity before the Dragon Knights could fully mature. The Battle of the Titan Belt lasted 6 days and turned the outer solar system into a graveyard of destroyed ships and frozen bodies, but humanity did not fight alone. This time 44 dragons, still young but growing stronger each day, tore through Krathian formations with fury and fire. Bonded humans provided tactical thinking and strategic planning that dragons alone lacked, while the dragons granted power and perception beyond any human limits. Maya led the front lines with Ash, who had grown to the size of a frigate in just 3 months together. They created new tactics, like dragons carrying boarding parties directly onto enemy flagships humans used. The bond to coordinate strikes across vast distances with split-second timing. It was not enough to win the war outright. It was enough to survive the war ground on for 2 years in a brutal stalemate that cost both sides dearly. The Krathians learned how to counter the dragons, and humanity learned to fight without them when necessary alliances formed with other species the Krathians had threatened. They were drawn by the impossible sight of humans and dragons standing together as one. Lyra and Nev grew into their power and led combined fleets with the confidence of those who had already lost everything. The bond between them and Ember deepened into something that made even veteran Dragon Knights shake their heads in wonder. Then came the Battle of Krathia, Prime Humanity. Did not try to conquer the Krathian homeworld, but simply proved they could reach Ita. Fleet of 500 ships led by Ember and 44 fully grown dragons. Broke through every defense. They burned the Imperial Palace to bedrock, but left the civilian population completely untouched. It was a message clearer than any words could ever be. We can destroy you, but we choose mercy instead. The Krathian Empire, which had never known defeat in all its history, began to fall apart from within. Some sectors sued for peace, while others fought on, but without any unity or central command. War did not end with a grand surrender, but with exhaustion on both sides. Everyone was too battered to continue, and too proud to admit complete defeat. 5 years after a desperate child had traded her doll for bread, Maya Grant stood before the United Species Assembly as humanity's representative. Ash, now massive enough to darken entire skies, rested outside the chamber as a reminder of the power that backed her words. "We did not want this war," said Maya to the gathered alien species. "We did not choose to become warriors of the galaxy, but a child asked for help and we gave it without thinking of the cost. That choice led to everything else, including the bonds and the battles and the blood, and I would make that same choice again without hesitation." She paused and looked at Lyra, who sat in the Silvari delegation's seat, no longer a princess of a dead world, but a founder of something entirely new. The Krathians taught us that the strong should dominate the weak, but to starving children. Taught us something far more important than the measure of any civilization is not its power, but what it is willing to sacrifice for those who cannot fight for themselves. "We propose an alliance," added Neve with a voice steady despite her youth, not of conquest, but of protection for all who needed Tenny. Species threatened with extermination can seek shelter under human and Silvari law. We'll train your warriors and share our technology, and, if necessary, we will fight your enemies alongside you. And what do you want in return?" asked the Vrex ambassador. With tentacles writhing in suspicion. "Nothing," said Maya, "simply because that is what the child in my cargo bay taught me sometimes. The greatest victories come not from what we take, but from what we give freely to others." The vote among all the assembled species was unanimous in favor. In the years that followed, the human Silvari Concordat became the conscience of the galaxy, not its strongest military power, but its most stubborn defender of the weak. Dragon eggs were shared with other worthy species and created bonds that went beyond biology and culture. The Krathians remained a threat in some sectors, but they were contained now. Empire was divided, and they were watching carefully. And, in a small memorial garden on Luna Station, a wooden doll sat in a place of honor protected behind crystal walls. Beneath it, a metal plaque was engraved with words that everyone who visited would retrade bread for my doll human because my sister is starving. These words began the war that saved the galaxy. Never forget that the smallest acts of compassion can reshape the entire universe. Lyra visited that memorial often, with Ember's shadow falling across it like a blessing from above. She would touch the crystal and remember the terror of that day so long ago, the desperate gamble she had made, the human commander who had chosen kindness when she could have easily chosen safety instead. "Thank you," she whispered to the memory of that moment, "for seeing us as people worth saving, for caring when you had no reason to care, for giving us a future when ours had been completely taken away, and somewhere deep in the vastness of space. Dragon eggs waited in hidden vaults, ready to bond with those brave enough to trade everything for a stranger's survival. Universe was vast and cruel, and often unfair, but in one small corner of it, humanity and the Silvari had proven something vital, that courage and compassion could burn far brighter than any star. The war had ended after years of struggle and sacrifice, but the legend of the girl who traded her doll for bread was only just beginning to spread. Children across 100 worlds would hear the story. They would learn that sometimes the smallest gesture of kindness could change everything, that helping one person could save entire civilizations, that the weak could become strong when they stood together. Maya Grant retired from active service. After 20 years of war, she spent her days teaching new dragon knights the ways of the Bondash. Remained with Her always growing old together as their minds intertwined more deeply with each passing year, Lyra and Neve rebuilt the Sylvari. Civilization from 17 survivors into thousands, they created new traditions that blended the old ways with human. Customsa, culture, born from tragedy, but raised in hope. The dragons multiplied across the stars. Newegg, a promise that the sacrifice of those who came before would never be forgotten. New Bond, a testament to the power of unity across all. Boundaries and every Dragon Knight swore the same oath to protect those who could not protect themselves, to show mercy even. To enemies to remember always that they fought not for glory or conquest, but because a hungry child once asked for bread and someone chose to give it.